Paul, also known as Saul of Tarsus, endeavored to spread Christianity beyond Jewish lands, resulting in the Christianization of present-day Europe. He was a Christian apostle who taught the teachings of Jesus to the pagan Roman world of the first century. Consequently, he is considered one of the most significant figures of the apostolic age by historians. Between AD 30 and AD 50, Paul established many Christian communities in the Anatolian Peninsula and southern Europe. According to information in the New Testament, Paul was a Jewish Roman citizen, also known as Saul. He was dedicated to destroying Christians and Christianity. Paul himself confessed that he violently persecuted Christians before converting to Christianity. He had personally approved the execution of Stephen. While traveling to Damascus to arrest Christians, Jesus appeared to Paul, and he lost his sight in the incident. 3 days later, Ananias of Damascus healed Paul's eyes. During this journey, Paul became a Christian and attributed his conversion to the appearance of Jesus, the son of Mary, to him on the road to Damascus. From that day on, Paul began to preach that Jesus of Nazareth was the Messiah, awaited by the Israelites, and also the Son of God. The Acts of the Apostles dedicates about half of its content to Paul's life. Paul played the most crucial role in the separation of Christianity from Judaism as an independent religion. His influence on Christianity surpassed that of all other Christian leaders. Paul taught that Jesus was the end of religious law and that the Christian church was the body of Jesus, classifying the world outside the church as those to be judged. Paul's writings are the earliest source that mentions the Last Supper. It is accepted that the Last Supper is the origin of the Lord's Supper. The concept of election mentioned in Romans 9 is interpreted by Eastern churches as God's foreknowledge of destiny. However, the interpretation of the same chapter as the doctrine of predestination is seen in Western church theology. Augustine's teachings, which view the Bible as God's grace, mercy, morality as the life of the Spirit, belief in determinism, and the doctrine of original sin, are entirely based on Paul's letters, especially the letter to the Romans. Some theologians emphasize that Paul's teachings are quite different from Jesus' teachings in the canonical Gospels. Theologian Barry Wilson highlights that Paul's teachings diverge from Jesus' teachings in terms of message, origin, teachings, and practices. Due to this fundamental difference between Paul and Jesus, some argue that while Jesus is the first founder of Christianity, Paul is the second founder. Just as in Eastern churches, contemporary Western humanists interpret the concept of election in Romans 9 as divine foreknowledge rather than determinism, in contrast to Western churches. Paul was a religious figure rarely mentioned openly in the Jewish world. Paul is not explicitly mentioned in the Talmud and other Jewish oral traditions. However, in the Toledot Yeshu, a medieval European account of Jesus' life, Paul is mentioned. Although Paul is not explicitly mentioned in the main source of Islam, the Quran Ibn Kathir interprets the story told without specifying names, time, or place in verses 13 to 21 of Surah Yasin, as referring to the first two apostles as Shimon and John, the third as Bulus, Paul, and the location as Antioch. Luke's account ends with Paul being under house arrest in Rome for 2 years. According to many, Paul's life ends at this point, but two pieces of evidence indicate that Paul's death actually occurred later. According to some reliable early church information, Paul's death is associated with the period of Nero's persecution of Christians. However, it is unlikely that this period coincides with the end of Paul's 2-year stay in Rome. Secondly, according to the pastoral epistles, Paul served in the Eastern Mediterranean after the period mentioned in Acts 28:30-31. Therefore, it is possible that Paul was freed from his imprisonment in Rome and continued his ministry for a while. Whether Paul achieved his goal of traveling to Spain is uncertain. Paul began his journey to Rome in the autumn of AD 59 and reached Rome in the spring of AD 60. Assuming he was released at the end of the 2-year period, mentioned in Acts 28:30-31, he conducted his ministry in the Eastern Crete between AD 62 64. Paul was rearrested during Nero's persecution and was executed shortly afterward, around AD 64-65,